There
Cool.
we are. Thank you, Photo Wings. So, Joss, are you ready?
When you are, yeah.
When you are. So,
When you are, as they say.
What I would really like if you would introduce yourself. Usually I do an introduction, but I saw part of your lovely biography, and I think it's better when you read it instead of me.
Okay, well, I'll put my best BBC voice on people. So yes, this is from an introduction I had to write for a portfolio that's doing the rounds as we speak. Anyway, so the preamble, of course, is how I started. But since then, I've become a member of the 7 Photo Agency with 7 published books to my double-barreled name. I've seen the dark side of organized crime, been shot at in Palestine, stood on the podium in Ibiza's Manumission with Fatboy Slim, winked at by Uma Thurman in Cannes, and fallen over in front of Joan Rivers wearing my kilt at the Oscars. A photographer always, I grab my Leica first, not the upflying garment that exposes a true Scot. From all the look on Joan Rivers' face, it was a smile, I think.
I love it. Thanks so much, Joss. It's amazing.
I had a sense of humor in this life, otherwise, well, it's all too much.
I would actually love to talk about the kilt for a little bit, but I'm not allowed.
Yes, I mean, I should be speaking to David Campbell. My family's McDonald's, for God's sake. They're massacred in Glencoe by the Campbells.
Do you still sometimes wear kilts, or was it only to the Oscars?
I think since lockdown, I've become too fat.
Oh,
but I hope
fit anymore.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I must admit, I haven't had cause to wear, but it is Burns Night coming up on the 25th of January, so I might have to have an honorary haggis and a wee dram, and we'll see.
Good moment to wear it, I think.
Always. Any excuse.
Okay. So my first question to you would be, what is your most important photograph? And feel free to share your screen whenever you feel like is the right time.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that. I mean, the important photograph, whoops, not that one. It's probably this one. Although, am I sharing it with you? I don't know if I am.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Just
click
share screen on the bottom. You'll be fine.
Share screen. Right, let's go. Okay. Share. Let's see if that works.
There we go.
Ah, good. So, in a way, I've got 2 of them. I mean, because my career is a little left field in terms of what we expect of photojournalism, I think I was always reminded to go back to my roots, which are documentary. But I had a hiatus for 10 years doing fashion. This was the picture I took in 1983 when I was at college. Now, I started photographing at my boarding school because I didn't like boarding school. I still don't. And I felt then that photography could be a vehicle to express what I felt, but also to show something that people didn't otherwise see or know. And of course, I didn't know what I was doing. I taught myself. That body of work is what it is. But I remember going to see Magnum photographer David Hearn when I was at school. I was 18, I think. And he looked at my pictures and he looked at me, up and down, up and down. Basically said, well, no, put your pictures away and go and learn.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. I think he said go and learn boy, actually, but I'm not quite sure. Bit like Captain Mannering. If anyone's seen Dad's Army, I was Pike. Anyway, I went to Newport, which was in 1983, 82, the kind of preeminent documentary course in the UK, if not the whole of Europe. So David was the tutor. And it was kind of weird because I didn't really fit in. This was the days of Margaret Thatcher. None of us approved of or agreed with. But I was always a little bit left field. I was too tall. I was a bit public school. I didn't really fit. And when it came to doing a final major project, which is what we did at college, I wanted to do something that was close to home. So I was brought up in Brighton, which is a small English town on the seafront, on the seaside. And it's known probably to this day for its care homes. And that at the time, even in the 80s, was a bit of a scandal where money was being taken from old ladies, and they weren't having a very good end of life experience. And I banged on must have been about 10 doors trying to get access to one of these care homes, and one let me in. And it was literally 100 yards from where my mother lived in Brighton. And I spent about 2 weeks there getting to know these ladies and gents, and it was really a rather lovely experience in itself. But also, I think it brought me home to the idea that you can photograph on your doorstep.
Yeah,
you didn't have to.
It was literally around the corner.
Literally 100 yards from home. And this picture, it's still in my portfolio to this day. And I don't know, it's one of those sort of rare moments, black and white, Tri-X. I remember processing it in my mum's downstairs toilet, for God's sake, because that's where my dark room was, until I went back to college. And somehow it's on my wall behind me at the top. It reminds me where I come from, that I have to sort of go back to that time as a 21-year-old student looking for stories that mattered in my neighborhood. When I left college.
How old were you when you took this image? Like around what?
20, I think, 21, 20.
It's an amazing image.
I was 20,
So
yeah, I was. I started at 14, so I had a head start.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah, you started in boarding school then.
Yeah.
With photography, right? Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, again, this generation I come from, we were inherently critical. It was something, the photography was a way of being a journalist with a camera, but criticizing. So this picture is a sort of refreshing change where actually it's very beautiful, I think. And the reality is, of course, this was a physiotherapist helping an old lady to walk. But of course, it looks like she's found God, because as we know, a picture can, belie the truth in so many ways. So
you're right, because when you look at this image, you think, okay, what is she looking at? Is she? Yeah. No, I wouldn't have thought she was at a physiotherapist session.
Exactly. And I think this is, again, what's interesting in our field is that one has to be so careful with captioning. And I tend not to over egg the pudding when I'm writing captions, but in this case, it's just Millie and Mrs. Ansell, because I remember their names. It's very strange, isn't it? You have a memory for these things, but it's lived with me ever since. Of course, when I left college, I couldn't get work for love nor money. What people don't really understand, it was a very closed shop in the 80s in Britain, where a few very good photographers did all the work, and you could not get in. There was absolutely no way an arriviste like myself could actually get any work. So when I left college, I got a job at the BBC doing publicity stills, and from then on did fashion, and spent 10 years. Yeah, so I just could not get any other work. So
just to be clear, so you first did photojournalism and documentary at university or schooling, and then you did fashion photography for 10 years.
Yeah.
And then after that, you returned to documentary.
I went back to documentary, but I never really left it behind, because again, for myself, and I think this is the difference between some of us, we talk about this at 7, but I was never really, I can't ever claim to be a photojournalist, because of my experience, I did my own personal stuff. So most of my output was projects, because I couldn't get editorial work. As soon as the firm came out in 2001, I got assignments. But before then, I remember trying to join an agency. I'm not going to name it, but a London agency. And the guy who ran it looked at me and went, "This work is really extraordinary, but I've never seen your name anywhere. Who the fuck are you?" Okay, thank you. Yeah, right. I didn't get in, of course. But that's how it was, I think, in those days.
But I think that's also your strength, right? I mean, I don't know. I think getting a lot of assignments, or getting assignments in general, can also kind of derive you from, or derail you, or what's the word? From telling good stories, because you worked on stories that you actually found interesting instead of just doing assignments all the time.
I think so. I mean, there's no right or wrong. I think everyone comes to the same end in some strange way. But I'm very glad the experiences I had, certainly even doing fashion, it really helped. I mean, I think, again, I had this mentor Percy Savage. You can invent his name, who famously, I think, well, he claimed that Christian Dior had named Eau Sauvage after him. He was Australian and he was a fashion PR. Looked like a kind of Australian version of John Wayne meets, I don't know, John Galliano, if you like. Big floppy hat, and was rude to everybody, 6'3". And I met him, and I don't know, he really helped me. He kind of taught me how to see, it's going to sound strange, but to look at beauty, because fashion, after all, is all about presentation and looks, which in documentary we do not take seriously, nor should we. You know, it's not really that important. But actually, when I look back, understanding the look of things is really, really useful. A hell of an advantage, I think, to the way things are, because we live in a visual culture.
Yeah.
So dear old Percy, who used to walk his leopards around the Bois de Boulogne, no less, given to him by Haile Selassie, was my first real mentor.
I knew there were going to be some crazy stories here.
Yeah, it was true. He did. Percy,
Wow.
God love him. May he rest in peace. I was in Ibiza photographing Norman Cook when he passed away, so I couldn't be at his funeral.
Oh, shit.
Hell of an interesting character. But I think, again, photography then, it didn't have the same constrictions that we are now faced with. I think as well.
What kind of constrictions you mean?
Well, certainly looking at how magazines and newspapers are kind of declining, and it's very hard to make a living.
Yeah.
It wasn't hard to be a photographer then. It wasn't necessarily, as I say, I couldn't get access to the Sunday Times then because it was a closed shop, but I certainly could be a photographer and do the work I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And I built a darkroom in my bathroom. I processed all the film myself. I mean, I remember somebody asked me why was the film in black and white? I didn't actually have the nerve to say, well, I couldn't bloody well afford to do it in color. I had to process it myself. What do you think? You know.
But I think actually the film is perfect in black and white.
Oh, yeah. Luckily for me, I mean, looking at big fat red-faced men sweating in the dark in black clothing would not look good in color. So exactly. Yeah, it was black and white. But that, yeah, again, that sort of sense of not belonging to anything and making your own path was part of the cultural identity in Britain in the 80s, I think. You know, whatever you did, certainly in London, in my neck of the woods, in Notting Hill, it was very political. Nobody agreed with Margaret Thatcher. We all hated her. I remember with Seamus going to Thatcher's funeral, and I had to be there to make sure she died. Sorry, but had to say that. But we felt very strongly that we were fighting against a regime that we didn't approve of, and that photography could be of benefit to that, even bizarrely in fashion.
But I think that's coming back now again, Jocelyn. I think there were about 20 years in between, or 30 maybe.
Yeah.
That it wasn't like that, but now it's becoming more political again. I feel photographers are, more political or becoming more political.
I mean, how the question, of course, is how to survive it, because again, that's the sea change. Is my flat that I still live in. When I moved in here in 1985, I think it was £300 a month rent, which my then partner and I got down to 140 because you could get the rent assessed. That meant it was affordable. Now I don't know how that can be done, but I know it needs to be. You know, the first casualty, of course, is news and truth. So there's Trump and our great leader taking a leaf out of the Goebbels handbook and dismissing all press, fake news. Clever, isn't it? Mm. Which means we in turn don't have a vehicle, but we've got to find one somehow. I mean, again, my early days of fashion, the agency I was with was called Z. And I'm Jürgen Teller and Stefan Sednawi, lovely Scottish photographer called Donald Christie, and myself, Nina Schultz, and a few others. But it was owned by Ziggy, who was Jamaican. So we had a West Indian Londoner who was running an agency where we were really trying to kick over the statues. And it was, I look back on those days and think, God, now it's hard to believe, but we broke boundaries. I mean, it was absolutely the questions that people are talking about now with mixed race and transgender. We were asking the same questions then.
Yeah. And when was this?
1980. Well, Z folded in 1989.
Okay.
So this would have been 80, I suppose, 88 to 80, 87, 88, 89. God, I'm very old.
Time flies.
But it's funny. I mean, looking back on stuff, it's not necessarily healthy, but sometimes it is, because you remember the positivity of it.
I think it's actually a good thing to reflect as well. Well, again, like going back, going through your archives.
Yeah, I think again, an archive. I'm not sure. I mean, I've been looking through the fashion stuff again because, you know, in our world, you tend to dismiss that. It's not brain surgery. Let's face it. It's pretty pictures. But again, it's quite curious how I think what I was trying to do was something very democratic and inclusive. Along came heroin chic and it all went to dust, and it's still there. That sort of size zero, really offensive way of dehumanizing people that fashion now propagates was anything but what we were doing in the 80s.
Yeah.
Then along come, you know, the grunge revolution. It's never gone. It's interesting how people don't know this because this new generation is not looking back. And maybe they're right.
Do you feel they aren't? I feel, okay, I'm not allowed to ask all of this probably, but I think actually in the current schools, there's a lot of looking back.
I hope so, because I think you can't learn from anything. If we need to look at the past so we don't make the same mistakes. Let's face it.
Yeah, exactly.
But certainly when I was at the LCC, it wasn't that experience at all. Very different.
No, oh, I didn't know.
Oh no, it was.
It's always good to look back. I feel you learn so much more from everyone who's done this before you and see what has been done. Okay, Giles, before we run out of time, because we have 4 questions, right, you already broke like a little rule, but for the people who've watched a couple of weeks back when Sarah Terry actually interviewed me, I also broke some rules and asked her to make some switches in the programming, and now Jocelyn did the same.
Oh dear.
Because you have 3 images that you took with you instead of 2. Usually we have 1 image, which is the important image, and 1 that is a photo failure. But you brought 2 important ones, and now we want to see them. Now that
the second one, this is the pivotal one, I think, which again, it's only ever been published once in the Face magazine. What's
happening here?
Well, this was a story. I pitched a story to the Face. The Face in Britain was the coolest magazine, the uber cool, uber cool magazine that everybody wanted to work for. And again, it was a closed shop until they got a New York art director in because the English guy had left. Boris Bencic, Croatian New Yorker, who didn't have the prejudices that English people had, and looked at my work and went, yeah, okay, you can work for us. And I pitched a story on the Criminal Justice Act, which at the time, 1991, 92, was a big deal. So Thatcher and Major between them had criminalized travelers. So, and this is also a time of rave culture and closure of a lot of freedoms. So I pitched the story on travelers, and I did a big story for the Face on travelers. This is, I think, the defining image of that story. At Glastonbury in 1992, before it was this huge behemoth it now is, the green field was full of crusties. Hippies.
This is, I mean, hardly recognizable as a festival in different, to the current one.
If it's an ad for Leica, it's quite a good one because this is the only frame on the whole thing. With a Leica, you can see what you're getting. So I kind of thought, great, I've actually got that. It was the last frame. So. Anyway, there he is, Bubble Man.
Such a cool shot. It's amazing.
The drip in exactly the right place.
Exactly.
I'm talking about luck, but that's photography for us. And I think in a way that changed everything for me because 1992, I was still doing fashion, but this picture led to I think a 10-page story in the Face, then another feature on the Face. I did about 3 for them before Boris left. Another English guy took over, and I left. But it led to the European newspaper, which was my big break, I think, and working for Paddy Kelly, great picture editor that she was, on the European, brought me back into the documentary world. To a certain extent, kind of opened doors. And thanks to Paul Lowe as well, who introduced us, my old friend who's now in 7. So that picture did it all. That really changed everything. I mean, admittedly, I was off the next month photographing some fashion shoot somewhere, but you could do both. It was a parallel line.
Of course. Did people ever question that you could kind of do both? Was that a thing to, like, were people saying, oh, you can't be a photojournalist or a documentary photographer if you're also doing fashion?
But don't forget, I couldn't get in to the Sunday Times or the Observer or any of
because of that,
the magazines that we now look at as being pivotal, influential and news magazines. So my market, I was working for Elle magazine and Marie Claire, and I was doing fashion for goodness knows who, and the Face. Which was not exactly, it was a style thing. And yet, I think looking back on it, the Face was probably more important than some of the other magazines that were much more newsworthy at the time, because it really did break boundaries with young people. It was a young person's magazine. So what was I, 30, just 29. It was the right time for me to be doing that.
Yeah, 100%. I love this image. And
It is my favorite.
Sarah does too. And Maggie does too. And she says the tie is just in the right place, just like you just said.
I know. And that drip, oh dear.
I know, it's perfect. It's really amazing.
I have to confess, there was some particularly good grass at the time. And I was lying there going, wow, this is really cool. The Rolleiflex on the grass and my Leica in my other hand. So,
that's the best moment, when you really know. I mean, it doesn't happen a lot, but when you just know you shot a good image, it's like, whoa.
I tend to agree with Cartier-Bresson, who said to Eugene Smith one day, how many good pictures have you taken this year, Gene? Oh, probably about 12, Henri. Yes, always did exaggerate. It's not one a year if you're lucky.
Yeah, so, exactly.
I think it is true, isn't it? Yeah.
It's so true. One a year is a really good score, I feel.
I've got 2 in a 45-year career, so I'm not winning at all.
No. You have way more.
But ones that really stand out, that stand the test of time, that actually, I look at those 2 now and they still remind me why I do this.
Yeah.
There's something about the way that photography can just go right under the skin. And
so why do you do this? It reminds you of why you do this? Why?
Yeah.
Why?
I think because it's a way of connecting with the human race and seeing something beyond the obvious.
That's beautiful.
And that sounds very pretentious, but actually that's just for me. But I think for other people, it entertains them too. I mean, again, back to Newport being British and David Hearn. But what we do is, and I think this is proven now with Instagram, we're never going to be rock stars or writers or poets. We're just photographers, which I've always rather liked. It is the most democratic medium on the planet. Everybody can be a photographer. Okay, so it's Instagram world and now everybody is, but is that a bad thing? I think it connects.
Yeah, that's true. I totally agree. I just wonder if this job will stay as special.
No, I think it goes back to Kodak, who, when they invented the box brownie, they said, you press the button, we do the rest. That was in 1898. Now, you've got an iPhone and Instagram, and everybody presses a button. All it means is there's just an awful lot more shit out there.
Yeah.
And you have to really sift through to find the good stuff. But I have a feeling it's really up to us to find ways of getting those messages out there.
No,
this was a light picture about something very serious. So these guys could not be this free ever again after the criminal justice came to pass in Britain. So again, stories.
That's also the thing, I think, that kind of divides documentary or photojournalism from a lot of the other images we can nowadays see on Instagram, is that this really has a story to it and therefore an importance to it, or there's a second layer basically.
I hope so. Again, 1983, 1992, so it's 10 years apart, but the messages are still very much, they're very similar.
Yeah.
Care in the community. Look at the society we're in.
True. Yeah.
Address it.
So, Jocelyn.
The fuck up.
The fuck up.
Well.
Can we move to your biggest photo failure?
Well, there were 2 really. This one, I have no.
I actually love the image. I don't know, but.
Well, yeah, but this is the only one there was, just about. It was so surreal.
So what is the story of this image?
Well, it was a fashion shoot for a very famous British designer called David Fielden. And I'd never worked with him before. And he commissioned me to do his spring summer couture collection, which included wedding dresses. And I don't know who it was, probably me, had this harebrained idea of doing it. And this was March. So it wasn't that cold, but it certainly wasn't warm. And photographing in the Avebury Stone Circle, which is an old Celtic burial ground in Wiltshire, very dramatic landscape. These menhirs are everywhere. And I didn't think twice. So we kind of turned up, hair and makeup was done. This lovely Filipino model who'd never been to England before was chattering in this white dress, poor love. And oh God, the heavens opened, the rain started, then the hail started, then the snow started. And that's kind of weird. It's March. It's not, and this is 1989, I think, 89, 90. I was at Z at the time, so yes, probably then. So climate change wasn't quite as pronounced as it now is. So this was just weird. Then it got worse. So I think I had a panoramic camera that I think I'd sold the shoot on the fact I was going to use a panoramic and all these menhirs would be in the picture and it was Celtic stuff. It packed up. Two of them, two panoramic cameras, both of them.
Wow.
Broke.
Because of the weather, it just like...
I don't know. I don't know. We are standing on sacred ground here.
Yeah, that
sacred burial ground. So, bottom line, then I was left with 35mm, trying hard to cover my ass and pretend this design that everything was fine when clearly it wasn't. And then one of the 35mm cameras broke.
No way.
Yep. So I was left with two 35mm cameras, one that was functioning. And that was the black and white one. So I had to kind of literally shoot black and white and color. Don't forget, this is film. So we didn't have this wonderful luxury of digital where you can convert. You had one camera body that was black and white, one that was color.
Yeah.
And two cameras, or four cameras, panoramic, 120 panoramic, and 35mm. What was I using at the time? Nikon's, I think. Which, let's face it, Nikon FM is pretty reliable. They don't go wrong. And they both did. Then the last surviving camera, that also, I could feel the film. The winder stopped.
You had one very unlucky day.
Seriously spooky.
And why did it, like, what do you do in a moment like that?
Cry. There's not much.
Yeah, exactly. But do you tell people like...
Wildly.
But I can imagine.
I had to pray that I had enough stuff. I mean, luckily it was sort of halfway or nearly towards the end of the shoot. So most of it, not all of it, but there was enough, I thought. Then, of course, the film was processed. Apart from about 3 rolls, completely blank.
Oof.
And the ones that survived, Tri-X, which is not super grainy, looked like this. Golf ball grain. I've never seen anything like it. It was like, and processing marks all over it. You can see in the background. It looks like, it looks quite cool.
I kind of like it. That's what I said. The first thing I thought when I saw it, I'm like, oh.
Exactly. So that's me selling it to the designer, saying, oh, isn't it great? It looks like he didn't fall for it for a second. And I never looked again, and I think my name was mud for about a year. But there we go.
Were they angry or were they
furious? Well, of course, because all the film was blank. I think Zed were pretty upset because, of course, I had to sort of not accept the fee because I had to accept responsibility for it. So yeah, all in all, a disaster.
And they didn't want to redo the shoot.
They did, but not with me.
Yeah, no, I meant with you, but no.
I think David went into a studio the next day with somebody very sensible, and no herring around fields, doing a Wicker Man shoot, which is what this became.
So now that you see this image, I mean, as I said, I really like the image. Actually, I can see it's grainy and I can see it's like has spots in the background. But what do you see when you see this? Do you have a little bit of
frozen stiff? She was frozen stiff, and I felt so guilty that I was making her do this. Actually, no, I like the picture. Trouble is, doing fashion shoots, you never just did one. There were something like 6 or 8 frocks that had to be photographed. That was just one of them, and in color and in black and white. So, pretty bad.
Yeah.
And just pure weird luck. I mean, cameras breaking down, processing going wrong, freak weather. All I can say is never shoot in the Celtic burial ground. I think my ancestors were telling me something there. It's like, don't you dare piss off, the old gods.
Everyone that's in this call now, please remember that.
I mean, I am being somewhat flippant here, but I can't explain it any other way. But thank God, that's aside from being at school and photographing my school chaplain's wedding, and which fucked up. I've touched wood, haven't had many major disasters.
That's also not something you want to...
Not good. No, the 2 disasters were real ones.
Yes, exactly.
Absolutely grade A disasters.
But you survived them.
Well, who's to say? Yeah.
And you have a good story.
I've always got good stories. I think that's the thing about our lives, is that they're never dull.
Exactly. That's the thing. I think there's a question coming in. Oh yeah, good question. From Paul. Paul Marotta. Did you get paid for that shoot?
No.
With 18 question marks.
No, absolutely not. I had to give all the money back. In fact, I was out of pocket because obviously paying for the processing and everything. So yeah.
Oh,
I mean, the only thing I could do was do the decent thing and grovel. Whew. He wasn't a happy bunny, that designer. Oh dear, he was difficult. Oh. At the best of times.
I see there are some people raising hands. I actually haven't seen that before.
Ooh.
I'm guessing because they have a question, but if you have a question, please put them in the Q&A because that's where we see them. The Q&A box is on the bottom, on the right side. Well, at least on my computer. Don't know where it is on someone else's, but
where is it?
That's where we see it.
Raise hand? How do I find them?
Yeah, someone raised a hand. But if you have a question, put it in the Q&A. And if there's a question, if there are questions coming in, Jocelyn, I'll let you know. For
some reason, yes, I've managed to lose the button that shows me who's asking questions, typically.
Okay.
Oh, chat, is that it?
Next question from my side, Joss.
Yep.
What is your dream image or your dream story? And this could be anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be something you want to shoot. It doesn't have to be something that's even possible to shoot. Just what would it be?
Ironically, I was thinking this the other day. I mean, I've pretty much done all those 7 books of mine, all those projects, all the things I wanted to do. I mean, there's still about 5 left to be published, but actually, I don't know. I mean, I'd almost like to kind of look. It sounds ridiculous, but I'm kind of intrigued by the sort of middle America and the whole white man rubbish that Donald Trump brought up. But I'd like to do that through country music. Isn't that bonkers? To look at Nashville and the understanding of, in inverted commas, and don't take me seriously, the white man's soul through country music. Wouldn't that be fascinating?
That is a fascinating idea.
Yeah.
That's really a great idea.
I'd quite like to do that.
You should watch Tiger
It could also
King.
go further because, I mean, I am Scottish, so the English folk revival, which is, I'm wearing the right jumper for it. That sort of, all around.
But is there a folk revival? Is it happening?
Well, I think they've been saying that for about 30 years, but yeah, it seems to be fairly. I suppose actually, given the difficulty it must be now for a young musician to have a band and a record label and getting stuff out there. Singer-songwriters and solo acts probably is the way forward. Yeah. Okay, so is this a project that you would really like to? I think I would like to do that. Yeah, I mean, spending time in Nashville would be great fun. Yeah, it would be amazing. I hate to say it, but I am a bit of a fan too. I do quite like country music. That's funny. Sorry. Really? I did a story once again for The Face with Echo Eshin, who's a lovely Nigerian journalist, and it was weird because we were photographing black guys in Atlanta and they were looking at me going, what are you doing with that guy? And they were saying the same to him, what are you doing with that guy? And we compromised in the car in Atlanta by having Sly and the Family Stone, because about the only thing we'd ever find was country music, which I quite liked and Echo couldn't bear. So, yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I think if you listen to country, when I was growing up, there wasn't a whole lot of country music in the Netherlands. Well, funny enough. But then I moved to the United States when I was 16. And I remember I was staying with a family, like a rancher family with cowboys and horses and, the whole thing. Yeah. And in the car, they would constantly listen to country music. And I couldn't stand it in the beginning. And then after a month, I was so addicted. I'm still listening to it now. It's 20 years later. I love it. It is good. I mean, Jolene is one of the all-time great tracks ever. 100%. You need to do this project. I think I do, don't I? I quite like the idea of you should of being a Brit in cowboy town. I mean, yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. And again, the subtext always is, where is this coming from? I mean, my ancestors are Scots. The Scots Catholics were ousted from the Highlands by the clearances, and of course, my contention is Scottish. It's the Scots who started country music, not the Irish. Sorry, but it is. And it comes from that kind of working class white blues, if you like, of the dispossessed. I mean, they're all sad songs about loss and love, Scottish and Irish. It's kind of storytelling in its own way as well. Yeah. This kind of music. It has a lot of, stories in it. And sometimes there are a lot of the same stories about love and loss. And, of course they are. But there's definitely a lot of politics in country music as well. And it's now been appropriated by the right wing, which again is really sad and shouldn't happen. No, you're right. Yeah, it's interesting stuff. You're really good at picking Well, I think I do the things everybody else wants to do. That's my problem. You know, look at my
Sorry,
camera.
what did you say? You do the
Well, I
things?
think I just do projects that nobody else wants to do. I mean,
No, I don't think we're smart enough to think of these kind of
well, I'm
projects.
sure you are.
If I think of
Not to
myself, I'm
do
like,
them.
this is such a good idea.
I remember the last time I did a talk for Seven. I mean, poor Zio looking at Idols and Believers. I mean, he was just aghast at why I would waste such time on something as trivial as celebrity culture. He's got a point, you know.
No, because it's a popular thing for people to look at, celebrities, and it's.
Well, I figure that's where you get the message across. If you do something that is either with humor or populist, you have a fighting chance of people looking at it. I think, not sure it's worked, but I have a feeling that's something we forget, you know. You don't always want to scare people over their breakfast tables. You want to show them something they can respond to.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
No, you're really good at finding these. I mean, in all your previous books as well, they're always subjects that are things that you actually want to see more about.
I think again, you know, that was the thing, wasn't it? The 80s and 90s with my contemporaries and my peers doing the hardcore stuff, and I couldn't get in the door, so I had to choose an alternative, and it's worked out well.
Yeah, you're right. It worked out very well, actually. So there are a few questions coming in. Thanks for that. Oh, there are quite a bit of questions coming in. But before I go to those questions, I think it might make sense to ask my last question, and then we'll move to the Q&A box.
Sure.
Anyone who has a question for Jocelyn, please put it in the Q&A box on the bottom right. But
do I have
my last question to you, Joss, is what advice would you give your younger self?
Get a good accountant.
Well, I haven't heard that one before, but that's a good one. Why?
I was never good with money, let's face it. Most photographers aren't. But I think if I'd had a decent accountant, I've got a good one now. But I mean, might have saved me a fortune and a lot of aggravation with the Inland Revenue. There we go. Nothing, things you don't want to worry about are that, you know, it's money well spent.
Very true. That's really solid advice. I really do think that as a photojournalist or as a photographer, documentary maker, in general, we would really like to just focus on taking the pictures, making the books, and not be emailing people all day long and doing accounting. Yeah.
I don't want to have anything to do with it. I willingly pay, you know, as much as I have to get that off my back.
Yeah.
You know, I think it's, you want to focus on what it is you want to be saying. And it's hard enough just doing the projects, certainly doing it off your own back when you've got no real backing. You know, I mean, I'm making light of having to process the firm in the bathroom, but bloody hell, there were times, you know, food or developer. Wait a minute, you know, you've got enough to worry about.
Yeah. So. Yeah. So you started to kind of, so you would have started earlier with having an accountant earlier in your career.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. First question is from LR. Don't know who it is, but LR. When is Muse going to be released?
Well, I wish. Yes, it's been years. Well, actually, do you know what? That's, God almighty, that's 22 years. That project is
in the making.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh my God, it is actually.
Can you explain a bit about what it is, maybe?
Well, Muse again it's an interesting one because I was brought up by 4 women, and obviously I've done fashion. I live in Notting Hill. I've had the kind of London life, if you like, but I've always known full well that beauty is actually, unlike Percy Savage's fashion idea, it's in the eye of the beholder. You know, when you fall in love with someone, you fall in love with them, and you love someone for who they are, not what they look like. And I got very intrigued by this idea way back in the 90s when I was starting to do the firm, when plastic surgery had become a big deal. And I had a friend she had a boob job, and it was like, oh my God, what have you done? You know, here, feel this, she said. Ooh, and it was really strange. A beautiful woman who's done this to herself. It was very odd that had become some strange form of currency. And now, of course, it's gone haywire with people believing that Photoshop's actually real. And no, I don't like my look. So 22 years ago, I started looking at all the people I knew, all the women in my life. I'd already done I was doing the big book of men before anyone jumps at me. So there was no way I was going to photograph men for this project because that was the firm. So this had to be something from my own experience, which is my mum, my grandmother, my aunts, my mum's best friend who brought me up. And in some way a homage to them and the reality of what love trust and beauty are. And I'd also read J.G. Ballard's The Kindness of Women, where he talks about beauty being the square inch of skin. And how delicious is that? So when you're in bed with someone you love and you're like that, and you're pressed against their, all you see is the detail. Bingo, that was it. So for 22 years, I photographed bits of people, good heavens, according to that tenet. Obviously not literally, but that intimacy, that closeness, the square inch of skin. And it's family, it's friends, mostly friends.
Beautiful.
And asking people, what do you like about yourself? Which is a terrible thing to ask any woman, but it's that sort of give and take, the process.
So you were asking that, like, this is in text as well, like you write text with it,
the pictures,
or you just ask them and photograph them?
The pictures are simple. I mean, there's just Christian names as captions, no names, nothing, because it's, in a way, it's not about, it's like, it would be invidious to start sort of making it about the individual, really. It's just, somebody likes their eyes, somebody likes the scar on their shoulder, but also, these are portraits, so you work around that process. I mean, it's done and dusted, but of course, climate is wrong for it. I'm male, I'm white, I'm middle class. It is too easy to misinterpret it without understanding the context, and people do not read context. They just read what they want to read. It's a difficult project to get out there right now.
And it's such a project with, like, I love the angle, and I love the fact that it is like to the women that you
absolutely
know. Yeah.
The idea that it should be in any way the male gaze or sexist is just disgusting. I have stood against that all my life. When you're brought up as a single parent family by 4 women, believe me, you become a feminist. It's just the way it is, and rightly so.
Yeah.
The very thought that I'm doing anything that's in any way against women makes me very angry. But that is the consensus. So,
and that's quite. Is that the reason the book is not yet here, or not here? Or
very much so. I mean, I had a show of it in 2009. It's not that old. And I remember being approached by a collective of women photographers in France saying, we've seen your work, we think it's amazing. Best work on women by a woman photographer we've ever seen. Jocelyn. I have a girl's name. So they assumed they didn't know who I was. That I was. As soon as they found out, I said, well, I'd love to be at your festival. I can wear my kilts, but sorry, I'm a guy. Never heard another word.
They didn't even reply.
No, well, no. Now, of course, I think, because people do know I'm a male, it's the other way. So how dare you photograph women like this? They're not even nudes. It's weird. But this is the sort of sensibility that a lot of, certainly I'm facing with that kind of work in this climate as a male in Britain.
Yeah.
I don't think it's the same everywhere, but it's certainly not easy here.
Well, And do you think there won't be a book?
No, eventually there will. I may be long dead, but there will be one day.
Okay.
I hope so. I think it's important.
Lucas maybe a bit worried it's not coming.
I just hate the idea that, yet again, you've got a whole teenagers looking at magazine covers or billboards and thinking they have to look this way. I mean, that is just
and it's unfair. Right. I mean, it's impossible.
It's exactly
to look that way.
It's wrong. I mean, you don't fall in love with that. I mean, God.
And that's why I think that this project is so beautiful and important.
Yeah. I'm glad you said
that.
I'm very proud of it. But again, under advisement, I've just kept it back because, wrong time.
Yeah. No, I see.
But again, it's another thing I was interested in, the idea of beauty. It fits my canon of, crime, rock and roll, celebrity culture, and beauty.
Yeah. I feel it's beautiful, but I see where you're.
I have no problem with it. With yet again, it's a difficult thing to counter when people do not brook any sort of criticism. They don't listen. We live in a weird culture for that now. I mean, look at Germaine Greer, who's been. I mean, God, how can anyone blank Germaine Greer? She's one of the greatest people of our time because she had the temerity to say something that people didn't like hearing.
Yeah. Well, it's also, I mean, that's again with social media. I think so many people we all have a voice now and an equal voice. And then you get more discussion as well.
Well, we would hope so, rather than a tick box don't like attitude.
Yeah, well, yeah, that's what it kind of can turn into as well, sadly. So we have 3 more questions and not a whole lot of time, but let's see. And if anyone else still wants, oh no, 2 more questions, sorry. Let me organize this a bit. Oh, this is a good one from Ron Jack. What work do you want to be remembered for?
Oh, I think it's got to be Bubble Man. A sense of humor. And I think provocations from humor. Provocations of humor. Well, provocation through humor.
Through humor.
It's ironic, I do the firm, and I know it's going to sound terrible. I know it's good, but I'm not. Can you? Not my favorite work.
Jocelyn, can you explain what the firm is? I just realized I know the project so well, but maybe there's people in here that don't know it.
No, there's yeah. I mean, I suppose.
I guess they do, but maybe not.
If I'm known for anything, it's 2 big projects on the British underworld. So photographing the British mafia, which, it's powerful stuff. But of course, again, open to a lot of misinterpretation. So the idea of glamorizing violence and all the rest of it. It's contentious. Actually, for me, it was important because it spawned, I suppose, my sensibility of looking at the social mores. So, as I say, crime, beauty, rock and roll in Pleasure Island, and how we try so hard to have fun. That sort of element of life, the obvious. But it's caused a bit of a problem. The firm is, it's gangsters. So.
And you said it caused a bit of a problem?
Well, I mean, I think just by nature, it's again, it's partly down to interpretation. 20 years ago when it came out, it was unequivocal.
Yeah.
The Sunday Times ran it. It was a critical appraisal of a world that isn't ours. 20 years on, that I suppose that's platform has gone. So all people see without any context are big ugly blokes looking big and ugly and blokey, and it isn't necessarily what the project's about. So context is everything, and I'm concerned now that the stuff, you go on Google Images and it's hopeless. It doesn't tell you anything useful, nor does Instagram.
Yeah, because you find them without the context. But if you would have to name, would that be the specific project by itself that you would like to be remembered by?
No, anything but. No, it's the one I wouldn't like to be remembered by, but the one, sadly, that I am. I think if it's a project, it's either Muse or it's Idols and Believers. The 2 most personal ones. I mean, Idols, again, because it turns out my birth mother was a model and my birth father was an actor, kind of rather prescient since I did fashion and wanted to be an actor. So, and it's all about looking at that Hollywood life and really exploring that side of myself. Because I mean, I got a place at the National Youth Theatre when I was at school and couldn't go because it clashed with my school curriculum. And that's when photography it's fine. Photography at 15 kicked in. And I never
that's back. When you started picking up 15, camera.
I never looked back. Photography or acting, photography won. And that was the right thing.
But you photographed a lot of the acting and a
lot of my friends are actors, and in that world, I naturally gravitate to it. Just, I suppose you do. It's nature nurture.
It's interesting how you pick 2 projects to be remembered by, and the one that everyone knows is the one you don't want to be remembered by.
Well, it's just a nightmare. I mean, of late, it's got worse because Jay-Z, of course, copied one of the pictures for an album cover, and it's 20 years since that happened. So there's all this nonsense about Jay-Z. And one of the villains wants to own the pictures to do his own version of the book. And oh God, forget it.
Yeah, I can imagine. That's draining. Okay, so let's not remember you by the film, even though I love the images.
I am not a gangster, in case anybody thought I was, which, believe it or not, people did.
They thought you were a gangster.
Well, they looked at the pictures and thought, oh, I've not to my face, but no one could have done that unless they were a gangster themselves. My favorite story was that I was the daughter of a famous criminal, which I heard. I stood next to somebody at my own book launch when they said, oh, this woman, no, she's the daughter of a famous criminal. That's why she's got this access.
No way. People are literally saying that. That's lovely, actually.
Delicious. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that.
It proves the point, doesn't it? It's,
yeah.
But what we do is about access and conveying information to others. So I think that gets lost a bit now. And that's dangerous.
There is actually one question from Tom, but now I'm not sure if we can ask it, because Tom also says, sorry, are you seeing this Q&A box?
I've got the chat thing. Is that it?
Yeah, the Q&A is to the other side. Wait, let me.
Oh no, I haven't got it.
Okay.
How do I get it?
Tom asked, it's on the bottom right.
Oh, there you go.
Q&A.
Okay.
Do you see the top question? I'm not sure if I should.
Anything about the relationship you built in the firm project? Do you still see any of the guys? Being remembered for the firm is better than not being remembered, right? Well, I'm not so sure about either of those, really. I mean, yes, I do speak to guys from the firm because they want to republish the damn book without me, which is kind of entertaining.
So is that going to turn into, do you think there will be a book, or do you think there will be a court case?
I don't know. I mean, I'm leaving it all up to it's not like that, this is not my call. There's an agent involved, and let them deal with it.
Okay.
No, it's funny, isn't it? Because you photograph a group of people that this yourself. I mean, I must have photographed 500 people, maybe, over all those different the two projects, the firm and the family. Maybe I made one or two friends out of the people I photographed, but you're not there to make friends. You're there to document. So keeping in touch with them isn't really. They're not my mates. I don't have them around for dinner. I don't meet them in the pub. I mean, I get on well with them, but it's a different thing to having them as close friends, from being a subject that you photograph to being a close friend. It's a fine line, and I wouldn't want to cross it. I tried very hard not to.
It almost makes it impossible.
Become a Netflix production. I wish it would. Although sadly, Hugh Grant did Mickey Blue Eyes, rather stole my thunder.
That's Luca. I hope it becomes a Netflix production.
Yeah, me too.
Anyone who's not reading.
Yeah, I'd like that. That'd be good. Make some money finally. God.
And then Ted says being remembered for the firm is better than not being remembered, right? Is he right?
I don't think it's an issue. I don't know about being remembered at all. I'm not quite sure. See, the beautiful thing about that is it's not our call, is it? So other people will make that decision, not up to me.
That's true.
So I can abnegate that one without having to say too much. I just walk away from that question quite quietly.
Well, Jocelyn, the time is actually up, and this.
Okay.
Well, when we talk about being remembered, I think such a good last question or remark that you just made. But thanks for sharing all of that with all of us.
Thank you, Ilvy.
Let me just quickly check in the chat, because I did see someone's typing. Oh, wait, there's a lot of people typing in the chat. Oh, but that's just love coming your way. From Maggie, who says fascinating and sending love. Jonathan says fabulous as always, Ilvy, and super to see and hear you again, Jocelyn. Cracking tales told and lessons passed on. Well, there's a lot of love for you. Are you seeing the chat? You should really read.
That's really sweet.
Okay. Thanks,
that's
everyone.
Made my day after blowing up my oven the other. Excellent. Good. Thank you.
And Peter says liking country music and being a Scotsman would be a great way to connect to Americans.
Well, hey, I'll have you know that Barrowlands in Glasgow. That's where it all started. Sydney Devine, send me the pillow you dream on. No less. Great song. Anyway.
Thanks. Well, thanks everyone for watching as well. Thanks, Jocelyn, for your time. And please check out the website of 7 Insider for more episodes that are coming up soon.
Thank you, Ilvy. Thank you, everyone, for taking the time to listen.
Okay.
Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.